As much as I want to complete the series of discussions on grief and suffering, I can't find time to do those videos at the moment because of my incoming launches of my online courses. Anyhow, I'd like to share with you a short story I wrote, which is somehow related to grief and suffering. We are faced with social issues every day, whether we like it or not. Unfortunately, we encounter these issues in our communities. We observe them in our workplaces, the church, school, and sadly, even in our homes. With the many difficulties that we are already facing, such social issues are unnecessary, but still, they affect us whether we like it or not. Nevertheless, that doesn't mean that we can't do something about it. In fact, we can do something about it in our own small ways. And I know and I believe that the kindness we show to others can ripple and become a viral attitude that we can share. In a community where social issues such as bullying, gossip mongering, and the likes are rampant, things seem to be difficult and hopeless because such attitudes seem to have been ingrained in people's minds and lifestyles. Yet I hold on to that belief that we can change our lives and the lives of those around us. These and the observance of the many social issues around us are what inspire me and actually drive me to write fiction in the hopes that I could teach lessons through my stories. This is not to say that I'm completely beyond committing the mistakes described in my stories. The truth is, I am as vulnerable as any of us. I'm just like the person next door who commits mistakes, fails, sins, etc. Still, we get to learn our lessons, and these are what I share in my stories. That's my way of saying that if I were given the chance to speak to my 25-year-old self, I would have advised her with this story. That's what I love about stories. They teach us, but unlike direct advices, they aren't offensive. I hope this story will do just that with anyone who needs a little lesson. So here it goes. Gobble, a short story by Phoenix Henry. He could feel the people staring at him, but he slowly walked by with his head down. He paused and hesitated. Sometimes he just wants to stop and say something, yet he never really had the courage to face the people making fun of his size. Many times, he heard them whisper his name followed by hushed sneakers. Dean, fat, always munching, lazy. These are just some of the side comments they'd voice. He knew he was the subject of their slurs, but he really can't figure out how to deal with them. He pulled out his phone, pretending to be busy with it. From the periphery of his vision, he could see the group of students gathered together, gazing at him. Some ladies covered their mouths as they leaned and whispered to their friends. He suppressed a sigh and pretended to have not noticed anything. When he thought he was out of their sights, he quickened his pace. He wanted to run away. He just wanted to disappear, so he didn't have to deal with people who seemed to scrutinize everything about him. He knew that they aren't all the same. Still, he felt that most of the people in school noticed nothing else about him but his size. He lived in a small town and the people actually talked about everybody. But he was one of the easy targets for their entertainment and mockery. He tried to make friends, and there were those who wanted to make friends with him. But he didn't like it when they take notice of his eating habits. He understood their concern, but he just felt that it's too much of a fault. He was the worst sinner in the world. He wandered aimlessly. What if he just got lost? What if he goes to a place where no one knew him? He pondered on the idea again, perhaps for the 1000th time. But he was only 13, and he wasn't brave enough to face many uncertainties. He kicked a broken twig on the ground and let out a sigh. He decided to dawdle, hoping to let the cloud within disappear. He knew he should hurry home, but he's starting to not care anymore. He closed his eyes, wanting to cry. He wished he can make time stand still, but he can't, and he realized he had to go home, almost ready for another sassy. Dean stopped by the door. He hesitated for a moment. He reckoned his mother has a visitor. It's a friend again, their neighbor. She was always at their house when her husband's away. He's a businessman and travels a lot. She, on the other hand, seems to have nothing better to do but come over and gossip all day. He doesn't like the woman. She makes him feel miserable. Actually, he thinks he doesn't like women at all. He didn't like his mother either. He thinks they're all alike. Angry, naggers, gossips, and simply irritating. Slowly, he opened the door and was met by his mother's torrential inquiries. Where'd you come from? Why are you late? Did you do what I told you to do? Did you finish this? Did you work on that? When will you learn to obey me? What should I do with you? When will you ever learn? Are you listening to me? The questions are always the same. Then the yakking goes on for a while, and the young child just bites his lips and bows his head. He learned not to answer back. It made his mother crazier that way, and somehow that made her tire more easily. In a little while, she'll be over with her reproach. The scene's always the same, not even when her friends are around. In fact, she seems to relish acting out as her friends watch her. Sometimes, the friends even chime in with her chatter, just as he expected a visiting friend will do once she got the chance. In desperation, his mother let out a sigh when he never said a word. I'm getting tired of you. When will you give me some peace and quiet? You always make me worry, and you don't even try to help me with the household chores, she cried, and heavily sat herself beside her friend, who surprisingly was still very quiet. Help yourself and have your dinner, then do your chores. I don't need to tell you everything again. Do your assignments, read your lessons. You're old enough to remember all your responsibilities, his mother said with a prolonged sigh after a long pause. The young lad went to the kitchen and ate silently. You can hear the two women talking. Their neighbor shared about her problems with her husband, and his mother traded with her cares about him and his father. Their neighbor didn't have a child. Probably it's best she never will have one. You can imagine how her child will suffer, and there'd be another lonely soul in town. Maybe, even if she has a child to attend to, their neighbor would still squander all of her time gossiping about the people around them or reprimanding her child for nothing. Later on, he heard the women talking about their friends and neighbors. He wasn't surprised. It seems it's what they do best. My, your son really eats a lot. Look at him, he heard his mother's friend comment. He lifted his eyes and saw the woman staring at him. He knows she'd been keeping an eye on him, as she always did. Then she'll comment about how big he is and tells her friend how to deal with his gluttony. Well, what can I say? That's all he knows to do well, his mother answered. When I teach him to do something, he'll grouchily do things. When I send him for an errand, he'll sluggishly comply. But when he's called to eat, he'll hungrily devour all he can. she continued. The young lad wanted so much to have a second helping, but since he feels his every move was being watched, he finished what was on his plate, cleaned up his mess, and looked into what else he could do to appease his angry mother. He thinks he wasn't really all too bad. He just wanted to be understood, but most of all, he wanted to be left alone in silence. He was finishing his chores when he heard his father's voice. He saw his mother's friend stand quickly. The two women whispered, most probably conspiring to see each other again the following day. He stared as the friend passed him by and went out through the back door. His mother hurried to the door just as her husband opened it. The young lad took advantage of the disturbance to snatch some food from the fridge and hastily went to his room. "Did you eat already?" he heard his mother say with a tinge of nervousness. She noisily scampered to the kitchen. His father was a laborer, and his coming home was unpredictable. Sometimes, those who hire him for his services would feed him. At other times, they'd invite him for a drink, but many times, he'll come home hungry, usually on different hours of the night. When he arrives, he'd usually complain about how famished he is and how difficult his job is. Otherwise, he'd grumble about his work, his co-workers, and even his employers. When the food is bad, he'll nag about it and criticize his wife. He'd eat noisily and would talk even when his mouth is full. His constant whining always made his wife nervous, but she was determined to please him. She kept herself busy as her husband seated himself to eat. "My friend was here again," the husband said, eyeing a clutch bag on the living room table. The wife instinctively looked at it, which was a good thing, because if she tried to deny and with an evidence like that, she'd be in great trouble. Her friend must have forgotten it as she hurried to go out. "I told you to never let that woman come here," he said with a voice that made his wife know without a doubt that he was angry. She was behind him, and she didn't have the nerve to look at his face. She, the woman stammered. "So, what did you talk about again? What has she been telling about her husband? And what did you tell about me?" he asked. She dropped by and went home immediately. She lied. "Fool me!" The husband raised his voice a little. He went on talking but never stopped eating. He reminded his wife about how her friend badmouthed him. Then he learned how she also talked cruelly about her husband. He gave his wife his usual spiel of staying away from her friend, about how evil she is. Then he complained about how bad his food was. "If I weren't as hungry as I am, I wouldn't have touched what you cooked," he said. That was how things usually are in the house. They seemed endless, and they're getting maddening each day. Dean can hear every word in his room. He knew that the food was good, and his father's criticism was just something he said whenever he was angry. He was hard to please. Otherwise, he was only trying to instill fear on his mother to make her focus on her chores rather than being a busybody. His father went back to his complaint about his mother's friend. He can hear his mother answering, but her voice was soft. He can't understand everything. That started what Dean expected to happen. His father seemed to obsess over such arguments. They oftentimes start with petty issues, then they'd sidetrack to old issues and catch themselves in a mess no one else creates but themselves. Their voices started raising. Dean sighed as he picked the fourth bar of candy he took from the fridge. He chomped on it furiously as he heard his parents attack each other.